this identification, one is identified with this boundary to such an extent that one has lost one's own status, only this remains. When one sees the table remains. This thing. Anything that one sees, that remains. How to regain this status? How to regain the paradise which was lost? How to regain the kingdom of heaven? By transcending this experience. It's very obvious. By transcending this localized boundary. By going beyond the boundaries. Transcending boundary means going beyond the boundaries. Going beyond the boundaries means going beyond perception. Perception. Here is the first principle of TM, where from this transcending principle came. It came from the reality of identification. This identification became real, unbounded, started to be arrested by the boundaries. It's very strange. The unbounded starts to be arrested. And if you want to get out of the state of arrest, break the shackles, break the chain, break the boundaries, be boundless. How to break the boundaries? How to break the boundaries? How to break the boundaries? Because it is so strongly gripping one. Can we imagine the strength of the grip that localizes the unbounded? Can we imagine the strength of grip? The grip that a drop can have on the whole ocean. Squeeze the ocean in a drop. What will be that strength of the grip? It must be more than the strength of the unbounded. Strength of the unbounded. And the unbounded gets squeezed within a boundary. And how to break that very strong grip? Obviously, doesn't seem to be possible. Because if it was possible for the unbounded self to maintain its status quo, it would not have been lost in this small area. Boundary wouldn't have bounded it, but it has. So the grip of boundary must be bigger than the boundless, the power of the boundary. How to get out of this situation? One word comes to our rescue. Technique. Technique. Use a technique. Somehow use a technique. Some skill, some technique. Things that can't be accomplished ordinarily are accomplished by specific techniques. That's why they say problem-solving techniques. So many courses are given all over. Problem-solving techniques. Through a technique, one enters at the core of it and accomplishes the purpose. A huge rock, and 50 and 100, 500 people try to push it. It doesn't move. One man who knows the technique of lever, he puts a stone like that and puts a thing like that, and boom, there goes the rock. A technique, a skill. One skilled man is enough against 500 robust, unskilled. So it's not the physical power, but it is skill of action that accomplishes the purpose. Skill of action. Skill in action. The TM technique develops that skill in action, whereby it's a beautiful thing. TM technique develops that skill in action, whereby activity which used to bind the boundless now is used to stabilize the boundless. Activity which used to localize the unbounded. Activity. That activity becomes a means of developing the unbounded and maintaining the unbounded. This is skill in action. It's a very basic point of the philosophy of action. Philosophy of action develops a will, a skill through which an action which used to put a man in deeper ignorance. Binding the unbounded means putting life to deeper ignorance, gripping life in greater degrees of ignorance, localizing the unbounded in the activity. When the self is not able to maintain his unboundedness, then activity serves to localize the unbounded. One gets identified with this, localized in this. So this action of this seeing, or action of the phenomenon of perception, this action is binding the unbounded. But TM technique introduces a skill in action, whereby action now ceases to be a binding chain. It serves as a means to liberate the bounded. It begins to function completely in the other direction. The action used to bind, localize the actor. And now the action liberates the actor. The actor is liberated by virtue of action. This means that which was an enemy till today starts to be a servant from this moment. Not only ceases to be enemy, but serves to be a servant. This reversal of influence, complete reversal of influence of action, is developed by the technique of TM. Action which used to bind, that is now used to liberate the bound. To liberate the bound means stabilize the state of liberation. The action becomes a means of stabilizing the state of liberation. Whereas in the other sense, without the technique, the action is used to stabilize bondage. Action in one state stabilizes bondage and serves to be a permanent source of suffering, and through a technique it starts to serve as a means of liberation. Action is binding in the state of ignorance, and through TM technique it is liberative. Action is liberative. No more binding. This reversal of influence, how much glory we can give to TM technique? Anything that we have, we can afford to give it out, because it has provided us the ultimate value of problem-solving techniques. Liberation. Actions are actions. We have been doing actions since birth. Only all those actions have been binding us, have been causing identification with everything. That is our experience. Whatever we see, that is our consciousness. That. This is what is localization of the unlocalized, unbounded awareness. We know what our unbounded awareness is. We meditate and transcend, and that is unbounded awareness. And when we open the eyes, we come on to this and to this, all localized values. Activity is just localized in time and space. So timeless, unbounded, gets as if bound. In reality it can't be bound, but gets as if bound. The ocean can't be arrested by a drop, but as if it has been arrested. It's the ignorance. And because in its ultimate analysis it's not true, ocean can't be bound by a drop. That is why we say ignorance is not a reality. Knowledge is a reality. Ignorance is hallucination. It's a deception. It's not a reality. It's a deception. It's just superimposition. Superimposition. Now, Vedanta philosophy explains this phenomenon very intelligently by an example. A string is lying on the floor and the light is very dim. Light is very dim means the ability of cognition is not profound. Ability of perception is very low. And we see it, and suddenly we say, oh, snake. In reality, there is no snake. It's a string in its ultimate analysis. It's a string. In reality, it's a string. But because we cannot see it properly, our perception is dim. Our windows of perception are not clean. In the words of William Blake, he says, clean the windows of perception. And then we see it clearly. And when the windows of perception are dim, then string we don't see clearly. This unclear perception of the string creates a snake in the string. It doesn't create a snake, but perception becomes dodged. It becomes a deception. Something else is seen, and then the snake comes. And when the snake is there, all crying out and running about and breaking the head, falling against the floor here, the whole world of activity, the whole world of activity of suffering starts on that basis of ignorance of the real thing, just because we couldn't see it properly. Perception was unclear, and therefore the snake got up and the whole life was at stake. So all this crying about and running about and suffering and this whole thing on that level of weakness which is not there at all. There is no weakness in the nature of life. It's unbounded bliss. But then weakness springs and the world of variety comes up, all suffering and heartaches and throbbing of the heart and headaches, and everything comes to be a direct experience. What will happen to a man who sees these snakes and runs, and he may so much of throbbing and crying out, and someone will say, oh, what happened? Oh, God forbid, don't ask me, I am so much in all that is absolutely ridiculous. There is no snake, nothing, absolutely, but a deception has taken place, a deception, a false perception due to inability to perceive, that's all. Just inability to perceive. Just inability to perceive. There is no basis to this world of fear that has cropped up. But it has come up, and it's a very concrete reality for all purposes. All that one can't say, no one is experiencing fear and no one is suffering from heartaches. All that is a reality. What is unreality is the basis of it. On the surface, the whole thing is a reality. Suffering is a reality. What is unreal is the basis of it. So unless the basis comes to our vision, all this reality of the surface will always remain. All this suffering is a non-existent. All this suffering is non-existent only at its basis. Otherwise it's existent. It's there. You can't say not there. The great upheaval around, far away from the snake, everything. And it works in a chain reaction. No one would come to the snake. Everyone would be either there in that door and there, away from the cause. Away from the cause, everything would be manipulating to kill the snake and to get it out, and there will be councils there and councils there, and study of the problem there and study of the problem there. And all the heart specialists coming because the heart is failing there, and the whole world will get round this basis which has no existence at all. There is no snake, but someone cried out snake, and then everything started. So this basis of suffering, this basis of weakness, this has to be seen. And one man sees, somehow he has his maybe sharper eyes, or he got the light something and saw, it says it's a string. And then he runs about and says, there is no snake, there is no snake, there is no snake. But in the upheaval of the world of fear that has gathered round, so many cars running about, ambulances coming, heart specialists and all blood pressure specialists, all of them gathering around everywhere. This one voice of the man, there is no snake, there is no snake, there is no snake. Who hears him? It's very difficult to hear in that din of suffering, because that thing has been going on for such a long time, and the area of that fear is so huge and wide, and if one man says, oh, he seems to be unrealistic. Everyone is suffering, and he says there is no basis to suffering. What does he mean to say? Completely unrealistic is the voice of the one who has seen that there is no basis to suffering, because all are caught up in suffering, and all are caught up in trying to find a solution to suffering on its own level. Suffering is there, suffering is there, suffering is there, suffering is there, and then everyone is trying to contribute his might, all goodwill, in order to find the cause of suffering. And the cause of suffering is not there, it's not there, it's not there. It's right here. It's right here. Someone who opens his awareness to the cause, he finds it is non-existent. But, and then he locates. Cause is existent, cause is existent, but it is existing in the ignorance of the actual reality. Cause is existing in the air. It has no ground at its basis. What is on the ground? A string. Innocent string. It has absolutely nothing to do with the snake. This is the reality of the world. On one level of consciousness, suffering is very solid, unavoidable, real, something very real. No one can say it's unreal on one level. On the other, it has its own other levels. At the ultimate level, where there is no ignorance, where the reality is a direct cognition, where that unboundedness, purity, infinity, bliss is the reality, on that level, The whole thing is a drama without any reality. In the drama, some Mr. X comes up as some champion of football team or something, a monarch of the heavens. He comes up there. In reality, when we go deep into where is the monarch and where is the monarch and where is the... Take off his crown and take him out, and here is Mr. X. The whole thing is a drama where the player takes a role. He assumes a role. In reality, the story is different. But on the level of consciousness of the drama, everything is real. But on the other level of consciousness, the world is different. This is a realistic vision of life. There are different levels of consciousness. On those different levels of consciousness, the reality of the world is different.